And today, we have something really counterintuitive.
We really do. Today, we are on a mission that might sound, well, a little paradoxical. We're setting aside pretty much everything we thought we knew about corporate or even legal negotiation.
And we're diving straight into the deep end. We're talking about the strategies developed by the FBI's crisis negotiation team.
It sounds like a completely different world.
It's a complete philosophical pivot. I mean, our sources, they lay out this really shocking truth. The most effective tools for success, and it doesn't matter if you're talking a multi-million-dollar merger or just, buying a car.
Right.
They didn't come from business school case studies. They were hammered out, refined, and perfected in these incredibly high-stakes situations. You're talking kidnappers, terrorists, armed fugitives.
Okay, so let's unpack that, because that premise is just incredible. The underlying logic is, if these tactics work on people who have zero motivation to cooperate.
People who are, let's be frank, brutal killers in some cases.
Right. So if it works on them, then these same tactics must be absolutely devastatingly effective when you use them on, quote, normal humans who just want a good outcome.
That's the core idea, and the author's origin story really drives this home. He talks about teaching at Harvard Law School's winter negotiation course. This was back in 2006.
Right.
And he was the outsider, right? The operational guy from the field. And he's facing off against these students who are armed with all the cutting-edge theories from the latest negotiation books.
So they have the book smarts, he has the street smarts, so to speak.
Exactly. And he describes using his experiential FBI knowledge and just watching as all those carefully constructed academic techniques got, and this is his word, absolutely destroyed.
Wow. So it sounds less like a classroom exercise and more like a tactical ambush. You have these theoretically brilliant students who are relying on pure logic.
On pure rationality.
And they're being met by a system that's built on pure, applied, high-stakes psychology.
Precisely. They were trying to solve a logic puzzle, But they weren't dealing with a puzzle, they were dealing with a human being.
And that realization, that's what leads us straight to the mission of this deep dive, right?
It is. We need to permanently move beyond this assumption of purely rational problem solving. It's just not how we work. The true key in every domain to profitable, sustainable human interaction, it's emotional intelligence, applied tactically.
So to really get this new paradigm, we first have to understand what it replaced. I mean, for decades, the absolute gold standard in negotiation was the framework from the book Getting To, yes.
Oh, a hugely important book. Fisher and Urey, it systematized concepts like the BATNA.
Right, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Why?
Which is still, a critical planning tool. You have to know your walkaway point.
Absolutely, and that framework was incredibly successful, but only in certain contexts. What's crucial for us to focus on is the philosophical assumption at its core.
What was that?
The Getting to Yes school. It fundamentally believed that the emotional brain, the irrational, unreliable part of us, that it could be contained, that it could be overcome just by establishing a rational, joint problem-solving environment.
So they gave us this, perfect 4-point formula for this rational approach.
They did. Number one, separate the person and all their messy emotions from the actual problem you're trying to solve.
Okay, that already sounds difficult.
It is. Number two, focus on the underlying interests that are driving the action, not the positions people are stating out loud. 3, you cooperatively generate win-win options for mutual gain. And 4, establish mutually agreed upon standards to evaluate those options.
It's the ideal blueprint for a Vulcan, maybe, but definitely not for a human being.
Exactly. The fatal flaw, as our sources just lay out in detail, is that humans are not rational actors. And we know this now. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman and his partner Amos Tversky, they proved it definitively.
Right. Let's talk about that foundation. Kahneman's work, it's decades of research, and it showed that humans suffer from just a staggering number of cognitive biases.
I mean, unconscious, irrational brain processes that just systematically distort how we see reality, how we make decisions.
It's something like over 150 of these discovered processes that they steer us away from objectivity without us even knowing it.
And Kahneman codified all this in his huge work, Thinking Fast and Slow. He introduced the 2 systems of thought. So system 2, that's the one we think we're using all the time. It's slow, deliberate, logical, calculating.
It's the voice in your head when you're trying to do a complex math problem or fill out your taxes.
That's the one. But the real star of the show and the key to this whole FBI paradigm shift is system 1.
The animal mind.
The animal mind. It's fast, instinctive, automatic, and emotional. It operates on gut feeling, instant pattern recognition. It's your gut reaction to things.
And System 1 is vastly more influential than System 2, isn't it?
No, massively. Think of it this way. System 1 is the spring, the source that feeds the river that is System 2. Our instantaneous emotional reactions, our feelings, our impressions, they are the primary sources that shape our explicit beliefs. And critically, they shape the deliberate choices of our so-called rational mind.
So the deep insight here is that you don't debate System 2 logic head-on. That's a losing game.
You'll never win.
Instead, if you can subtly influence your counterpart System 1, how they feel about the conversation, how they feel about your offer, you do that through framing, through your delivery.
Then you are effectively guiding their System 2 rationality to the conclusion you want them to reach.
Which is exactly what happened in that Harvard law class. Let's go back to Andy, that bright student using all the academic tricks.
Right. The author, the FBI negotiator, he didn't argue the logic of Andy's deal. He didn't say, your numbers are wrong. He just calmly, with a deferential tone, asked this loaded question. He said, how am I supposed to do that?
And the beauty of that question is its pure emotional impact. It doesn't land in the logical brain. It lands right in Andy's System 1.
Instantly creates doubt, discomfort.
It signaled emotionally that his offer wasn't just bad, it was maybe a little insulting. It wasn't viable.
Precisely. His System 1 accepted that implied criticism, which forced his System 2, the rationalizing part of his brain, to scramble. It had to find a logical reason why the offer was bad and then justify producing a better one, a more lucrative one.
He was guided to a new conclusion that he thought he came up with all on his own.
He felt he was in complete control, and that is the essence of this new paradigm. It leads directly to the hostage negotiator's core philosophy, which is just based on acknowledging this irrationality in all of us.
That we are all fundamentally crazy, impulsive, emotionally driven animals.
It's a very realistic lens to view negotiation through. When they're dealing with a kidnapper demanding a ransom, the FBI recognizes that, kidnappers are just businessmen trying to get the best price.
That is a wild thought.
It is. But it means negotiation is always, first and foremost, driven by these invisible emotional levers. Fears, needs, perceptions, desires. If you ignore those, you're ignoring 80% of the game.
So given that emotion comes before logic, the very first tactical requirement has to be establishing safety, establishing rapport immediately.
Right away. Whether you're on the phone with an armed bank robber or you're sitting across the table from a volatile client, it starts with the tactical use of your voice.
This is where we get the iconic late-night FM DJ voice.
That's it. It's characterized by being deep, soft, slow, and having a downward, a descending inflection. It's this calm, soothing cadence.
And the tone is everything here. The goal isn't to sound like you're in charge or to speed things up. The goal is to create physiological safety.
You're trying to signal unconsciously to the other person's amygdala, that primitive fear center in the brain, that there is no threat here. You're signaling, I am calm, therefore you can afford to be calm. I'm okay, you're okay, let's figure this out together.
You can see the raw power of this in that 1993 bank robbery anecdote from New York. This was a crazy situation. The initial negotiator, a guy named Joe, was swapped out mid-crisis.
Which is a huge protocol violation. You almost never do that.
Why would they do that?
Well, sometimes it's a last resort to shake up a dynamic that's gone completely static, to introduce a new element. So the author, who was an NYPD lieutenant at the time, he steps in unannounced to talk to the robber, Chris Voss.
Wow. That must have created instant, just explosive tension. The robber is expecting to hear Joe, and suddenly he gets a new voice on the line.
Exactly. But the author immediately, from the first word, employed that soothing, downward inflecting DJ voice. And despite the high level of confrontation, he was essentially calling the robber's bluff, challenging his identity. The tone just eased the initial hostility.
So the voice itself was the de-escalation tool.
It was the mechanism. It created this little bubble of calm that allowed the conversation to even happen, even when the words themselves were pretty provocative.
It sounds like the first instinct that we all have to fight is speed. The sources really emphasize this, that rushing is this common, innate mistake for all negotiators.
In a crisis, in a performance review, it doesn't matter. Going too fast just risks undermining all the trust you're trying to build. The other person feels unheard, or worse, they feel like you're trying to pressure them.
The value of time, especially in a crisis situation, must be just incalculable.
It is. Slowing the process down forces the other person out of their System 1 panic mode. The mantra is brutal, but it's simple. If someone is talking, they're not shooting.
Every second of dialogue is a second of gathering information.
And it's a second where that internal pressure cooker on the other side is getting vented just a little bit.
Okay, so once that baseline of safety is there, thanks to the voice, the next critical tool is something called mirroring.
The FBI sources describe this one as the closest thing to a Jedi mind trick. And scientifically, it's called isopraxism.
Isopraxism.
Yeah, it's a core neurobehavioral instinct. Humans and animals, too, for that matter. We unconsciously copy each other. We match speech patterns, body language, tempo, because that replication process is inherently comforting.
It speaks to a really fundamental biological drive, doesn't it? We fear what's different, and we're naturally drawn to what's similar.
So mirroring is just the subtle art of insinuating similarity. To build that unconscious trust, you're signaling, hey, I am like you can trust me.
And while this can involve body language and things like that, the FBI technique is purely verbal. It's almost laughably simple.
It is. You just repeat the last 3 words or the most critical 1 to 3 words of what your counterpart has just said.
So walk me through that. If I say, I'm really worried about the timeline for this project because the budget is just so stretched thin, and you just say,
the budget is stretched thin.
Right. What happens in my brain then?
Well, you're immediately forced to elaborate on those words. You're going to explain why it's stretched thin. It sustains the connection, and you don't even realize I've done anything other than listen really, really intently.
It's disarming. It proves you were listening, but it doesn't interrupt my flow or make me answer some structured question.
It's an invitation. It invites you to go deeper into your own thought process, and you feel I'm right there with you.
It's basically a very subtle, very low-effort conversational hook that just guarantees more engagement.
And the data, it really supports the unconscious power of this.
Yeah.
The psychologist Richard Wiseman did this great waiter study. It's a perfect proof point.
Okay.
So one group of waiters, they use standard positive reinforcement. They'd say, great, or no problem, after taking an order. The other group mirrored the order back exactly. So that's 1 cheeseburger, medium rare.
And what happened?
The group that mirrored earned a staggering 70% more in tips.
70%?
70. And the people tipping more, they didn't even know why they were doing it. They just felt a better connection with that waiter. That's the power of that unconscious rapport.
Okay, so we've got the voice and the mirroring building this unconscious similarity. Now we move into the third pillar, which is tactical empathy.
And this is described as emotional intelligence on steroids.
And we need to be clear here. We're not talking about sympathy. We're not talking about agreeing with them.
Not at all. We're talking about recognizing, and this is the crucial part, vocalizing the counterpart's perspective and their emotional state.
So it requires this intense focus on their delivery, their tone of voice, their body language. You're paying attention to what they are feeling, not just what they're saying.
You're trying to see the world from their point of view, and then you articulate that view back to them.
Okay, let's dive into the story of the 1998 Harlem high-rise siege, because this illustrates just the relentless, almost exhausting application of this technique.
A massive case. You had at least 3 heavily armed fugitives holed up, no phone contact, total deadlock.
So how do you even negotiate that?
Well, the negotiator was literally speaking through the apartment door for 6 hours straight.
6 hours?
6 hours, and he wasn't making demands, he wasn't offering deals, he was just using that late-night DJ voice and repeated precise labels to vocalize their perspective, their fears, their motivations.
And these weren't just wild guesses, right? They were deductions based on the situation.
Exactly. He was using labels like, it looks like you don't want to come out, and it seems like you worry that if you open the door, we'll come in with guns blazing.
Wow.
And the most important one, the one he kept coming back to, it looks if you don't want to go back to jail.
So that label, targeting their ultimate fear, was just this persistent hum for 6 straight hours.
The whole negotiation was an emotional siege. The negotiator refused to acknowledge anything but their reality.
And then, after 6 hours of just radio silence from inside, the door finally opens. The fugitives surrender.
And when they were asked why did you finally give up, their answer wasn't a logical one. It was purely emotional. They said, we finally believed you wouldn't go away, so we just came out. You calmed us down.
The sustained tactical empathy just dissolved their emotional resistance to surrendering.
That is the power of labeling. It's defining someone's emotion out loud, but using tentative phrasing. It's a shortcut to intimacy because you get close to their reality without asking a bunch of intrusive questions.
And by verbalizing the negative thoughts, like the fear of confrontation or going to jail, you bring them out into the daylight.
Yeah.
The sources call this bleaching them of their power.
It's like a cognitive restructuring process.
So can we tie this back to Kahneman's systems? How does labeling an emotion physically affect the brain?
The science here is fascinating. There was a UCLA brain imaging study by Matthew Lieberman that provided the neurological proof.
Okay.
When subjects were shown faces expressing strong emotions like fear or anger, their amygdala, the brain's alarm and fear center, it just lit up with activity. They were in System 1 fight-or-flight mode.
But when those same subjects were asked to consciously label the emotion they were seeing, to just articulate it, to say, that person looks angry, the activity immediately shifted.
Where did it go?
It moved from the amygdala to the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. That's the area that governs rational thinking and language.
So you're basically hijacking your own System 2 language processing to dial down the System 1 panic. Labeling an emotion, it disrupts its raw intensity. It makes it an object to be considered rationally instead of just an immediate driver of impulsive action.
So the delivery has to be critical. You can't just blurt out, you're angry.
Right.
That's just accusatory. It's aggressive.
Oh, that would be a disaster. The rules of delivery, they demand a respectful, calm, and tentative tone. Your labels have to be phrased as observations or statements, and they always have to start with phrases that show it's your interpretation.
Like it seems
Like, or it looks like, or it sounds like. You have to give them the space to correct you.
But if they correct you, isn't that a failure? Haven't you gotten it wrong?
No, it's a massive success. If they correct your label, you've just gathered new information, and they feel heard and respected enough to offer you the correct information. The whole strategy is what they call clearing the road before advertising the destination.
Explain that.
By preemptively labeling all the negative thoughts, all the fears, you create this neutral, safe space. And that is the only place that true trust can actually be built.
Okay, so we've established safety with the voice, built rapport through mirroring, and we're building trust through labeling. The entire point of this process is to get to a genuine agreement.
Right.
And that agreement, it turns out, is signaled not by the simple word yes, but by a very specific, much more powerful phrase.
It is. But before we get to that breakthrough phrase, we have to talk about the word we've all been conditioned to fear, which is no.
Which seems completely counterintuitive. I mean, everything in sales, in life, tells you to avoid no.
It does. We fear no because we associate it with rejection, with failure. But from the other side's perspective, no is often just a temporary statement. It's about maintaining the status quo because any kind of change is scary. Saying no gives them a moment of protection from that scariness.
So a smart negotiator actually wants to get a no early on.
You want to get it out of the way because it instantly gives the counterpart a sense of control. They've protected themselves. That allows them to relax and actually listen more effectively because they haven't given anything up yet. You've let them keep their ego barrier intact.
Okay, so contrast that useful no with what the sources say is the worst possible answer you can hear. And that answer is, you're right.
It's so deceptive, right? Most people are taught to aim for you're right because it sounds like agreement. But in the real world, it's almost always just a conversational brush-off.
It's the yes, yes, dear of negotiation. It's what a parent says to a kid. Yes, yes, you're right. Now please stop talking. Yeah. It signals compliance in the moment, but zero commitment to any kind of behavioral change.
We see this danger perfectly in the story about Brandon, the football linebacker.
Okay, what was his deal?
He was getting taken out of critical plays because he had this obsession with hitting blockers head on. He took a lot of pride in the confrontation. And his coach and the author, they kept telling him, you've got to dodge the blocks, move around them.
And Brandon would say,
you're right, every single time. And then he would immediately go back to hitting head on. He hadn't truly integrated the lesson.
Why not?
Because the rational part of his brain, his System 2, was agreeing that, yes, avoiding injury is good. But his System 1, his emotional drive, was screaming that dodging was cowardly. It was unmanly.
So the breakthrough only came when the author used labeling. He had to articulate Brandon's hidden motivation, that emotional constraint, his internal black swan.
Right. The author didn't argue technique anymore. He labeled the pride. He said something like, you seem to think it's unmanly to dodge a block. You think it's cowardly to get out of someone's way, that you look soft.
And the response that came back was the genuine breakthrough.
Yes. Brandon looked up and he said, that's right. That is the golden ticket. That's right is immeasurably more powerful than yes.
Why?
Because it signals that the other person feels you have accurately, completely, and deeply understood their world, their position, their struggle. They embrace the conclusion that follows because they feel like they arrived at it on their own.
So in that moment, the author wasn't telling Brandon what to do. He was defining who Brandon was. And once that description was accurate, that's right, the emotional block was gone. And that allowed Brandon's rational mind to finally implement the change.
Exactly. And the most effective way to trigger that's right, is by delivering a concise summary of their position and their feelings. The building blocks are just a label combined with accurate paraphrasing. You're validating and affirming their reality until they feel truly, truly heard.
Let's see how this played out in the highest of high stakes. The Abu Sabaya hostage case in the Philippines. This was a protracted negotiation.
It was. The terrorist leader, Sabaya, he was stuck on a $10 million ransom. But he wasn't really negotiating a business deal. He was using the ransom to posture, citing 500 years of Muslim oppression and historical grievances.
This was 4 months of just total deadlock.
Absolute deadlock. All the logical arguments, all the threats, all the counteroffers, they all failed because they didn't touch the core emotional identity that Sabaya had wrapped up in his position.
So the Filipino negotiator, Benji, he had to rely purely on active listening and relentless summarizing.
He had to just trust the process. He stepped back from his own demands and just let Sabaya exhaust his own narrative. Benji wasn't summarizing logistics. He was summarizing the historical pain, the sense of powerlessness that Sabaya was talking about.
He was repositioning Sabaya's world back to him, but using Sabaya's own words. And that dissolved the emotional barrier.
Right. The breakthrough wasn't about the money at all. It was when Sabaya, kind of recognizing the negotiator's persistence and his understanding, he acknowledged that Benji had somehow kept him from hurting the hostage. He said something like, "I don't know what you did to keep me from doing that, but whatever it was, it worked."
So that moment, that kind of grudging acknowledgement that the negotiator had entered his world and changed his behavior without a fight, that was the "that's right" moment.
That's right. It signaled a vital emotional breakthrough. It didn't end the negotiation right there, but it broke the deadlock. It allowed the talks to dry out long enough for the commandos to create and seize a rescue opportunity. Without that genuine emotional shift, the price discussion would have been completely meaningless.
Okay, so once we've secured that deep understanding of "that's right," the next challenge is to shift the conversation into problem solving. But you have to do it without triggering their natural resistance to being told what to do.
And this brings us to calibrating questions. This is the secret to gaining the upper hand by giving the other side the powerful illusion of control.
So what is a calibrated question?
They're open-ended queries. They're designed to force the other person to pause and think, but without feeling like they're being interrogated. They're not requests for facts, they're just nudges for solution-oriented thinking.
So they buy you time, they take the aggression out of the conversation.
And crucially, they shift the cognitive burden of solving your problem onto them.
The critical technique here is a pronoun shift. We have to use what and how, and we have to avoid the word why.
Why is a trigger word. It almost always sounds accusatory. If I ask you, why did you miss the deadline? It lands as an attack. It forces you to get defensive, and it instantly shuts down your system to rational thought.
So we calibrate those harsh why questions into what questions. Instead of why did you miss it, it becomes what caused the delay in meeting the deadline.
Exactly. It focuses on the situation, not on you as an individual.
The sources do mention one strategic exception to the no why rule. When can you use it?
Only when the defensiveness it creates actually supports the change you want them to see. So if you're trying to convince someone to try something new, you might ask, why would you ever change from the way you've always done things just to try my approach?
So it forces them to mentally defend the status quo, which subtly makes them start to question why they're so resistant to change in the first place.
Exactly.
Now, the ultimate calibrated question, the one that destroyed the Harvard students, is, how am I supposed to do that?
Its power is just multifaceted. It's a non-confrontational, it's a deferential way of saying no without ever using the word. So you don't pierce the other side's pride. It's this elegant, almost passive refusal that immediately transfers the problem-solving responsibility over to them.
Let's spend some time on the application here, because this is where the actionable knowledge for everyday life really is. Tell us more about Kelly, the consultant who was owed money.
Kelly was in a classic tough spot. She was owed a lot of money by a corporate client, but she was afraid of, jeopardizing the relationship if she demanded payment.
And then the client calls her, not to pay her, but to ask for more work.
Right. And our natural instinct there is to just lash out, right? To demand payment, to say a harsh no.
Of course.
But Kelly stayed calm. And she used the golden question. She said, I'd love to help, but how am I supposed to do that? She just put the question right back on the client, forcing him to consider her constraint.
The key is that the client heard a yes, but it was followed by a shared problem. He's thinking, okay, I need this work done, so I have to solve her payment problem.
And the client's response was immediate. It was apologetic. He was forced to confront his own lack of follow-through. He apologized, he gave her a new accounting contact, and he assured her she'd be paid within 48 hours.
All because of the illusion of control. The client thought he was solving his own business problem, not caving to a demand from Kelly.
That is incredible leverage from just a 5-word phrase.
So once we have an agreement, how do we make sure the other person follows through? Because we know a yes can be counterfeit.
Oh, it absolutely can be. A yes can be counterfeit, which is just trying to get rid of you. It can be confirmation, a simple acknowledgement, or it can be commitment, which is the genuine intention to implement.
And to ensure commitment, we use the rule of 3.
The rule of 3. You get the counterpart to agree to the same thing 3 times in the same conversation, but using varied methods.
So how does that progression usually look?
So the first agreement is just the initial yes to the deal. That's number 1. The second agreement is usually when you use your summarizing and labeling process and you get them to reply with a, that's right, that's number 2. That signals they deeply understand it.
And the third check, that has to be about implementation, right?
Correct. The third step, number 3, is a calibrated how or what question that focuses on the mechanics of the follow-through. Something like, what should we do if we get off track next month? Or how will you make sure your team gets that data by Friday?
It forces them to verbally commit to the logistics, which makes the agreement much stickier.
And you have to be vigilant for what's called the implementation trap. There are 2 big danger phrases that signal a lack of true commitment.
What are they?
If you hear, you're right, especially in response to that final commitment check, they're probably not fully invested. But the absolute red flag is, I'll try.
Oof.
In negotiation, I'll try is just a polite way of saying, I plan to fail, or maybe I'm reserving an excuse for when this doesn't work out.
So when you hear those evasion phrases, what do?
You have to calmly dive right back in with more calibrated how questions. You keep going until they define success and implementation in their own committed voice.
Okay, so if we accept this core premise that humans are emotional, irrational decision makers, then 2 really critical concepts have to be completely reevaluated: fairness and compromise.
And the sources argue that compromise is often the worst possible outcome.
The husband wearing 1 black shoe and 1 brown shoe.
Exactly. Neither person got what they wanted, and the result just looks ridiculous. True compromise often means both sides feel a little bit cheated. The goal isn't compromise. The goal is deep understanding that leads to genuine, voluntary behavioral change.
And this idea of a universal fairness is, well, it's a myth. And it's been proven by decades of behavioral economics.
Just look at the ultimatum game. It's the perfect evidence. You give 2 students $10 to split. The proposer offers a split, let's say 8 for him, 2 for the acceptor. If the acceptor refuses, both get nothing.
Rationally, the acceptor should take any offer above 0. $2 is better than $0.
But students consistently reject offers they see as unfair, even if it means they walk away with 0. They will choose mutual loss, pure self-sabotage, if their sense of emotional justice is violated.
It's that irrational rejection of a $2 offer that shows how powerfully our emotion, our System 1, steers our System 2, even overriding rational self-interest.
And since value is so determined by emotional perception, we can actually manipulate that reality by using anchoring.
The Swiss flag coffee mug example.
Yeah, if it's sitting far away, it's worth $3.50. You position it right next to the buyer, and suddenly the perceived value jumps to $5, maybe $7. The framing changes the value completely.
And the most potent cognitive bias we can leverage for this kind of framing is loss aversion.
Right. We know that people are far more motivated by the fear of losing something they already have or expect to have than they are by the potential for an equivalent gain.
So that creates a critical strategy. Anchor their emotions low. You prepare them for a massive, catastrophic loss.
And then when you present your actual offer, it's not perceived as a loss, it's perceived as a victory. It's an opportunity to avoid the disaster you just framed for them.
Let's detail that dramatic subcontractor anecdote. The author needed to cut their pay drastically, from $2,000 a day down to just $500 a day for several months of work.
I mean, presenting that pay cut cold would have been an immediate walkout, no question.
So he anchored their emotions low first.
Right. Before he ever mentioned the $500 figure, he spent a lot of time detailing the job's massive organizational problems, the chaos in the client company, the potential for total project failure. He painted a picture of inevitable, massive loss.
He made them feel emotionally grounded in the idea that this was a disaster zone and that they were probably going to lose that $2,000 a day anyway just because the project would collapse.
Correct. And only after establishing that low anchor did he introduce the offer. And he framed it using loss aversion. He said something like, "Still, I wanted to bring this small opportunity to you before I took it to some other guy."
So the focus immediately shifted from, I am losing $1,500 to, how do I make sure I don't lose this $500 to a competitor?
And every single contractor took the deal, not one counteroffer, because the emotional frame had completely shifted the reality of the situation.
So once that emotional stage is set, when it comes down to the actual price, the bare-knuckle bargain, we need a tactical system so we don't fall into that trap of just meeting in the middle.
And that is the Ackerman model.
What is that?
It's a systematic, highly structured offer-counteroffer method. It's designed explicitly to avoid a 50-50 compromise while letting the other side feel like they really fought for it and won. It relies entirely on signaling commitment and effort.
Okay, walk us through the 4 steps.
Step 1, determine your target price. That's your 100%. Step 2, you set your first offer aggressively low, at roughly 65% of your target. That's your emotional anchor. It signals where you're starting from.
And steps 3 and 4 are where the psychological magic really happens.
Step 3 is you calculate 3 precise raises, and each one is a decreasing increment.
What does that mean?
So if you move from 65% to 85% in the first jump, that's a 20-point move. Your next move might only be from 85 to 95. That's a 10-point move. The decreasing increments are critical because they convince the other side that they are squeezing the last drops out of you, that they are exhausting your ability to concede.
And the final 2 critical touches.
First, use odd, non-round numbers in every single offer. $37,263, not $37,000. Round numbers feel temporary, like placeholders. Odd numbers signal that this is the result of deep, thoughtful, painful calculation. It makes the offer feel serious and permanent.
And the second thing?
You always include a non-monetary gift or concession with your final offer. That triggers the principle of reciprocity.
The classic example of this in action is the negotiation for the Toyota 4Runner. The author was targeting $30,000 against a $36,000 sticker price.
And he used a combination of the Ackerman structure, these indirect no responses, and critically that question, how am I supposed to do that, over and over again?
So the whole strategy was just to get the salesman to bid against himself.
Completely. When the salesman dropped the price to $34,000, the author didn't argue, he didn't counter, he just used a deferential indirect no with a calm voice. He just said, I simply can't do that price.
So the salesman comes back with $32,500. He even writes, "You win," on the paper, trying to induce that counterfeit, yes.
And the author's calm response, I'm sorry, I just can't do that. By avoiding any aggressive language, by constantly using questions and deferential language, he never pierced the salesman's pride. He kept the ball in the salesman's court.
The salesman felt like he was still in control of the movement.
Right. And eventually, just through sheer mental exhaustion, he moved himself all the way down to that $30,000 target price. The technique turned a confrontation into a slow, patient extraction.
We've established that negotiation is all about understanding the other person's reality. But what happens when the most critical piece of information is something completely hidden, something you didn't even know you should ask about?
That is the black swan. It's a term popularized by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. The original concept refers to an event that is, unthinkable, unthought of, but once it's discovered, it completely shatters your worldview.
Like the discovery of an actual black swan in Australia in 1697, which proved that not all swans were white.
Exactly. And in negotiation, black swans are those hidden interests, those hidden constraints or motivations that once you uncover them, they change the entire dynamic. They give you instant, disproportionate leverage.
So you have to look beyond the stated demand.
You have to. Take the bank robber, William Griffin. The police were focused on logistics, the money, the hostage release, the getaway car. But the black swan, his true hidden interest, was that Griffin wanted to be killed by a cop. He was aiming for suicide by cop.
So if the negotiators had known that motivation earlier, the entire strategy would have been different.
It would have pivoted completely, from focusing on money to focusing on preventing self-harm.
Or the example of the Coca-Cola contact who just suddenly went silent. He became unresponsive during a complex deal. Our natural assumption is, oh, he lost interest or he found a better supplier.
But the black swan, which was only discovered through these persistent, empathetic, calibrated questions, was that his entire division was being restructured. There was chaos, and he had lost all his influence. He was just embarrassed to admit his personal loss of power.
And once the negotiators labeled that embarrassment and worked around his internal constraint, the line of communication just opened right back up.
The Korean student's case is another perfect example of a hidden motive. He needed his ex-boss's permission for an internal transfer, but the boss just kept saying no. And the transfer made logical sense for the company and for the student, but the boss wouldn't budge.
What was the black swan there?
It was buried in the boss's long-term career plan. He knew he was going to be up for a vice president promotion in 2 years, and he desperately needed an ally in headquarters to lobby the CEO on his behalf.
Transferring the student meant losing that potential ally.
Exactly. So once the student offered a non-monetary concession, a firm commitment to serve as that ally remotely, the boss immediately granted the transfer.
That is immense leverage found in a detail that seems completely irrelevant and non-monetary. So to find these unknown unknowns, we have to become master observers of verbal cues.
And the sources highlight that pronoun usage is a massive tell.
How so?
Intense listening should focus on who is using I, me, and my. If they're overusing these pronouns, it often suggests they have less actual decision-making power. They're focused on their individual performance or compliance or just survival. They're usually the foot soldiers trying to perform well.
Whereas the true decision makers, the ones who are hardest to pin down, they often defer authority. They use we, they, or them.
Think back to the bank robber Chris Voss. He was constantly referring to the others in the bank, claiming they were the volatile ones, suggesting he had no control. But in reality, he was the ringleader. He was just trying to confuse the negotiators and avoid accountability.
So when you hear a lot of we or they, it signals they're trying to gain distance and not be pinned down to a commitment.
That's right. So once we've maybe uncovered a black swan or two, how do we apply that knowledge? This brings us to the crucial black swan rule for engaging different personalities.
And this rule is the ultimate counterpoint to the golden rule.
It is. Don't treat others the way you want to be treated. Treat them the way they need to be treated. You have to adapt your communication style to their negotiation style. We can identify 3 primary types.
First up, the analyst. What characterizes them?
The analyst is methodical, diligent, and above all, they hate surprises. They move slowly. Their voice is often measured and soft, kind of a cold version of the DJ voice. And if an analyst goes silent, it's not because they're angry. It is genuine thinking time, and you have to respect it.
So to negotiate with them, you need to focus on providing clear, detailed data.
And you have to warn them of potential issues far in advance. They need to process the data so they don't feel blindsided.
Okay, next up is the assertive. They sound much more like the traditional corporate bulldog.
They absolutely are. They believe time is money, they love winning, and they are direct, fiery, and candid. When you're dealing with an assertive, the critical mistake is to assert your own point first.
So what do?
You have to let them feel heard. Focus entirely on what they have to say. And once they are convinced that you have fully registered their view, then and only then will they be willing to even listen to your perspective.
Finally, the accommodator. This sounds like the easiest person to deal with, but I suspect there's a trap here.
There is a huge trap. The accommodator is relationship-focused. They want to please you. They often instinctively use mirroring and labeling themselves because they just desire harmony.
What if they're conflict averse?
Extremely. The risk is that they will give you a counterfeit yes just to end the conflict and avoid disappointing you. When you're negotiating with an accommodator, you have to immediately press for commitment and implementation. Use the rule of 3. Make sure their agreement is genuine.
So by adapting our style and by intensely listening for those unknown unknowns, we stop playing checkers, which is a one-dimensional game of logical position.
And we start playing 3-dimensional chess, where emotion, psychology, and adaptive strategy are what dictate success.
This has been a fundamentally challenging deep dive. It really forces us to confront the reality that we are far more driven by our animalistic emotional minds than we like to admit.
I think so.
The core takeaway here is that great negotiation, it isn't about strong-arming someone or winning a debate of logic. It's about what we called listener's judo, using your counterpart's own energy, their own perception, their own emotional resistance to reach a shared objective.
Exactly. We've extracted these key operational tools, derived from crisis negotiation and validated by cognitive science. The power of that deep, reassuring DJ voice to establish safety.
Mirroring, to build that unconscious similarity and just keep them talking.
Labeling their fears and their negative emotions to calm the amygdala and disrupt that fear response.
Actively seeking, that's right, as the only true sign of genuine understanding.
And strategically using how and what calibrated questions to subtly shift the problem-solving burden onto them and provide that illusion of control.
And I think the most difficult instruction of all is just overcoming that innate human desire to avoid conflict. We avoid the discussion, not because we fear the person across the table. We fear conflict itself. Our physiological response is designed to maintain harmony in the tribe.
And navigating that conflict with these empathetic tools is really the key to being a master negotiator. If the ultimate goal of adopting these techniques is not just temporary compliance, but genuine, lasting behavioral change,
The kind that shifts a company's long-term strategy or a person's outlook.
then you have to fundamentally understand and define the other person's world back to them.
So as you head into your next high-stakes, or even just routine interaction this week, whether it's a big deal or a difficult discussion with a colleague, consider this provocative closing question. If you treat others the way they need to be treated, what small, non-obvious black swan clue, that slight hesitation, an unusual use of we, an unexpected emotional trigger, what will you search for to truly understand the hidden leverage points in the world of the person across from you?
Find the unknown unknown, and you find the path to success.
Until next time,
Yeah.
stay curious.